This HomeworkBurst video looks at the Gothic horror homework booklet. At the start of the project, you'll have been given 16 tasks to choose from, and you'll have been asked to do a certain amount. This video focuses in particularly on task number 12. Task number 12 asks about reading an extract from Frankenstein, one of the most famous Gothic horror novels of all time, and starting to answer the following question. How does the writer use language to describe the monster and to show Frankenstein's feelings about the creature? What we'll do over the course of this little video is break down how you might go about doing that. We'll read the extract and we'll have a look at other things. The first thing you should do is you should pause the video here and rack your brains about whether or not you know much about Frankenstein at all. You will have seen references to it in things like The Simpsons or other popular culture, and you might even have read bits yourself. So pause the video here and have a little think about that, then unpause and on we go. It's now time to read the extract. At the start of this, Dr. Frankenstein is at university and he's been working on a particular experiment. Okay, now you will find as we go through that a lot of the vocabulary, because it's a early text, is quite challenging, and therefore what we'll do is once we've read it, we'll have a look at some of the individual bits and we will pick apart some of the language and some of what's going on. But for now, try to pick up what you can as you read through. But you'll always have a chance to rewind the video and look at this bit again once you've looked at some individual quotations in more depth. Here we go. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 in the morning. The rain pattered dismally against the panes and my candle was nearly burnt out when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe, or how delineate the wretch with whom such infinite pains and care I had endeavoured to form? His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful! Great God! His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness. But these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes that seemed almost of the same colour as the dun white sockets in which they were set, and his shrivelled complexion and straight black lips. The different accidents of life are not so changeable as the feelings of human nature. I had worked hard for nearly 2 years for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. For this I had deprived myself of rest and health. I had desired it with an ardour that far exceeded moderation. But now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Unable to endure the aspect of the being I had created, I rushed out of the room and continued a long time traversing my bedchamber, unable to compose my mind to sleep. At length, lassitude succeeded to the tumult I had before endured, and I threw myself on the bed in my clothes, endeavouring to seek a few moments of forgetfulness. But it was in vain. I slept indeed, but I was disturbed by the wildest dreams. I thought I saw Elizabeth in the bloom of health, walking in the streets of Ingolstadt. Delighted and surprised, I embraced her, but as I imprinted the first kiss on her lips, they became livid with the hue of death. Her features appeared to change, and I thought that I held the corpse of my dead mother in my arms. A shroud enveloped her form, and I saw the grave worms crawling in the folds of the flannel. I started from my sleep with horror. A cold dew covered my forehead, my teeth chattered, and every limb became convulsed, when, by the dim and yellow light of the moon as it forced its way through the window shutters, I beheld the wretch, the miserable monster whom I had created. He held up the curtain of the bed, and his eyes, if eyes they may be called, were fixed on me. His jaws opened, and he muttered some inarticulate sounds, while a grin wrinkled his cheeks. He might have spoken, but I did not hear. One hand was stretched out, seemingly to detain me, but I escaped and rushed downstairs. I took refuge in the courtyard belonging to the house in which I inhabited, where I remained during the rest of the night, walking up and down in the greatest agitation, listening attentively, catching and fearing each sound as if it were to announce the approach of the demoniacal corpse to which I had so miserably given life. Oh, no mortal could support the horror of that countenance. A mummy again endued with animation could not be so hideous as that wretch. I had gazed on him while unfinished. He was ugly then, but when those muscles and joints were rendered capable of motion, it became a thing such as even Dante could not have conceived. Okay, So we've read it. There will be bits you've understood, there will be bits you haven't. Let's see if we can pick that apart. What we'll do is we'll have a look at each quotation and we'll just focus on plot to start with. We'll have a look at what actually happens. So there's a series of slides to take us through that. Let's look at the first bit. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that sat at my feet. And I've put 5 questions at the bottom for you to have a little think about. What you should do is, once I've read the questions, pause the video, then afterwards I'll talk through the answers to that after you've had a little think. Okay, here we go. So, you should think about the time and the date of when this is set. He's talking about an accomplishment. What does he seem to have achieved? He's talking about toils, which just means work. What has he been working on? He's anxious. What's he anxious about? And there seems to be a science experiment going on. What is this science experiment for? Pause the video here, have a think, and then come back to it once that's done. Okay, so it's night, it's November. He's been making the ability to infuse life, to put life into a lifeless thing. So he's got all these science instruments around him and he's anxious because he's not sure it's going to succeed. In the next quotation, my candle was nearly burnt out when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. You should think about, what's the candle got to tell us? What new event happens? What impression of the creature do we get first? And there's a convulsive, a sudden jerking motion. What does that convulsion suggest about this thing that's come into life? Pause the video here, think about your answers, and then check in with mine in a moment. So, the candle's nearly half burnt out, so he's been working for a while at night. Then the creature opens its eye. The yellow eye is quite a disgusting image. It's quite unpleasant. It doesn't seem very nice. And then that convulsion, almost like a fit of some sort. It doesn't seem to be quite right somehow, this newborn monster. In the next quotation, he reacts to what he's created. His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful! Great God! This time you should think about what the limbs are, what proportion is supposed to mean about those limbs, how a person might select features, and then what's the mood in the last line. Pause the video here, have a think about that, then unpause and check your answers with mine. Okay, so he's talking about the arms and legs of the creature, the limbs, and they're all where they should be. Everything seems to fit together all right. In this circumstance, he talks about selecting the features. He picked the face and the eyes and the hair colour and things like that. We'll talk about how that might have happened in a moment. Then, in the last line, you've got that sense of shock. Here, in this quotation, he goes into great depth describing the face of the monster. Let's have a look at this. His yellow skin scarcely covered the work of muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was of a lustrous black and flowing, his teeth of a pearly whiteness, but these luxuriances only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes, that seemed almost of the same colour as the dun white sockets in which they were set, his shrivelled complexion, and the straight black lips. Things to think about here. What's the creature's skin like? We've got the word lustrous, which means shiny. What are we learning about the hair? And then we've got signs of rotten decay through this. Can you spot them? Pause the video here, have a think about that, then unpause and check with my answers. So, the yellow skin is suggestive of death. This thing seems to be rotting away. That's reinforced by the black lips at the end of his shrivelled complexion, the shrivelled face. But it's got lovely hair. Could be a Pantene Pro V advert, some sort of hair shampoo advert. It's got lustrous black flowing hair and nice teeth as well. It's obviously had good dentistry. Okay, so we've got this weird contrast between good and bad looking. He reacts. The beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Unable to endure the aspect of the being I'd created, I rushed out of the room and continued a long time traversing my bedchamber, unable to compose my mind to sleep. Here, what dream is he referring to? Why does he leave the room? Why can't he get to sleep? Pause, then check with my answers. Okay, so the dream he's talking about here is the whole thing of he wanted to create life, and he wanted it to be beautiful and perfect. It hasn't come out like that. So that beauty vanishes. He then runs out of the room because he can't bear to look at it, unable to endure the aspect of the being I've created. And he can't get to sleep because all the thoughts are rushing around in his head and it's all too horrible. Then he has weird dreams. Okay, in the weird dreams you need to pick up on 2 things. One, he sees the woman he wants to marry walking through Ingolstadt. He goes to give her a kiss. She turns out to be his dead mother. in a shroud, and then some grave bugs, grave worms, rotting maggots fall out of the cloth. It's a death dream, and it's all about this idea of guilt and weirdness of something nasty having gone wrong. And in the last bit, the monster climbs in his window to say hello. Okay, and he pulls back the curtain of the bed and sees the monster's face. Alright, so the monster goes to speak to him in some way but can't form words. It might be smiling, it might just be about to bare its teeth at him, and then it sort of reaches out a hand and he decides, well, it's going to kill me, it's going to catch me. So he runs from the room and he stays out the room all night until the monster's gone. So that's the basic plot. Now let's move on with something a bit more intellectual. Here I want you to create your opinion. Take the 4 sentence stems and give me an opinion that's nice and shaped. Okay, what do you like? What are the creepy bits? What's wrong with the idea of creating new life from bits of dead people? And why do people like this novel? What can you see in it that seems exciting? Dead simple. Pause the video here, write your 4 sentences, and then unpause and on we go. Now, I want you to think about the morals and ethics of it. I want you to dig a little bit more into the key question of this novel. Dr. Frankenstein decides to create life from the pieces of dead bodies. So he stitches them together, makes a new body. Why is that wrong? What is it about that that's morally and ethically wrong? If you had to explain to a small child or someone who had no morals, why is that wrong? Once you've formulated an answer, unpause the video and on we go. Now we need to look at something that's a particular phrase that you may or may not have heard, the idea of playing God, which means to take on the power or role of God yourself, which is considered disrespectful and blasphemous. It's a crime against religion because that exceeds human authority. That's not our place, you might suggest, to do the things that God is supposed to do, like in this novel, create life. A reminder, we looked over these 5 key ideas for Gothic horror in a previous video. If you haven't seen them before, pause the video here and have a read through them. If you have, play straight on and we'll go on and look at how they apply to this novel. For your next task, take the 5 things on the left and, very straightforwardly, on the right you'll see a little box that suggests you should look at, in this novel, the Gothic is a strong element. The most Gothic parts are, and you should compose 2 or 3 sentences that explain how the ideas on the left link to this novel extract that we've just read. Once you're done with that, unpause the video and on we go. We're now going to explode some quotations. I've chosen 4 for us and kept it quite simple. I've given you one little page where you haven't got any prompts and you can just have a little think, and then on the next page some tightly focused sentence prompts to sharpen your ideas. You should pause the video after each one so that you can work your way through and you can structure your ideas carefully. Let's have a look at quotation 1. His limbs were in proportion and I had selected his features to be beautiful. Beautiful? Great God! Pause the video here and have a little think, then unpause for the next one. Here you see 3 sentence stems suggesting you should focus on the exclamation mark and the reference to God, creating a sense of shock really. The creature is not given a name, which we've talked about before. If you're not given a name, you're not important. And then the choice of verb I had selected implies the narrator is or feels, and there you might want to go back to the idea of playing God. Pause the video here and finish those 3 sentences, then unpause and we'll look at the next quote. Your next quotation here focuses again on the look of the monster. You should pause the video here and give yourself some thoughts, then unpause it and look at the sentence stems. Here you have the sentence stems, and I would suggest that if this was me, I would be looking at the colours, the nice ones and the ones that suggest something rotten is going on here. The juxtaposition between positive and negative language, the way the monster was supposed to be perfect but hasn't turned out that way, and the sense of rot and what creates that language. Once you've done that, unpause and move on to the next one. Here I've chosen the confrontation with the monster, the idea that I beheld the wretch, the miserable monster whom I had created. He held up the curtain of the bed, and his eyes, if eyes they may be called, were fixed on me. His jaws opened, and they muttered some inarticulate sounds, while a grin wrinkled his cheeks. He might have spoken, but I did not hear. One hand was stretched out, seemingly to detain me, but I escaped and rushed downstairs. You should pause the video here and have a little think about how the monster is presented, then unpause and look at the sentence stems. Here I've suggested you want to look at 3 things: pity, hate and disgust. I think it's important that the monster isn't just evil. Here we see a confused and frightened thing that's basically just been born. It doesn't know how to speak. It reaches out for him. Is it really trying to hurt him? You should think about whether the language shows you those things. There's 3 sentence stems here to finish off, and then you should have assembled a complete answer to the task we had at the start, which looked at the idea of how this is a Gothic horror. Best of luck. If you need any help, remember to check in with your class teacher, who will be able to give you some further information.